do you remember a handful of weeks ago when you were sitting right here to my left on this screen and you were like, I think it's over for Remy? I mean, I think it's just something we have to move
I didn't
past.
say that. No.
You don't remember it? Okay. Well, the headline of our basketball friends that time was like something to do with and why Matt Tait doesn't think it's time to give up on Remy Martin yet. I mean, I'm just like kind of remembering that. I thought I'd ask.
No, you may have said that. You may have said that you weren't ready to give up, but I would have never. That doesn't sound like something. Does that sound like something I would say, honestly? If there's one thing I've been consistent on is flip-flopping my opinion on Remy Martin and his importance to this team and whether or not he's actually going to improve week to week.
If you don't have consistency, you've got nothing.
This is Basketball Friends. He is Matt Tait. I am Nick Schwerdt. Kansas still dancing in the Sweet 16 in a matchup against Providence looming this weekend. But the story of the first weekend, and really going back 2 weeks, Matt, to the final 2 games of the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City, is that Remy Martin has finally become the player that Kansas thought they were getting when they signed him from Arizona State last summer. There's a lot of people, maybe present, that had their doubts as to whether or not this was ever going to happen, but honestly, I think there were probably people inside that locker room, coaches, players included, that wondered if this was ever going to happen. Maybe Remy Martin even had doubts. Now, he said all the right things. He was Kansas's best player for those 2 games in Fort Worth, and I think even those last 2 games in Kansas City, he was one of, if not their best players. And he's doing it at the right time in the exact way that they thought he would. They wanted explosiveness, quickness, athleticism from the guard spot, shot-making ability. He has provided all of that over the last 2 weeks.
Well, you can say what you want about his trials and tribulations and the crazy road that he's been on, but I think the last couple of weeks validate the whole thing. He was hurt, and he's not anymore. Because when you're hurt, you don't trust yourself. When you're hurt, you're down on yourself. When you're hurt, you're in a funk. And he was all of those things when he was battling through that bone bruise that kept him out way longer than anyone would have wanted. So once he got past that, once he got to the point where he felt like himself again, he was able to go out and play like himself. And it turns out that Remy Martin is a pretty damn good player, just like everyone thought he would be all along. And for Kansas, already a number 1 seed, go through the season without him being much of a factor and rack up a bunch of wins and only lose a few games, no real bad losses. For that team to then add this piece at this time of the year seems almost unfair.
Are you convinced that whatever was holding him back from being this player we've seen the last 2 weeks was purely injury related? Because I still think there might be some credence to the whole fitting in, buying in aspect of this as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the injury thing certainly made it harder for all that stuff to matter, right? Like you have to be on the floor, you have to be practicing to not only fit and feel like you fit, but also to show the coaches, hey, this is who I am, or that I'm improving, or I hear you and I'm going to go show you that I can do it. If you're not practicing, you can't do any of that. If you're not playing, you can't do any of that. So I'm sure they were tied together in a sense, but I still think the injury was the biggest factor there, right? Like, because even if it is a mental thing or a fit issue, well, he wasn't able to do anything about it because he was injured. And so that was probably where it got darkest, I would guess, where he was really feeling like, boy, this is a bad situation and I don't know if I can make it through this. And he did. He kept his head down. His teammates kept supporting him. And here they are now reaping the benefits of that.
How much do you expect opposing defenses and coaches to start game planning for him? Because you've covered the sport long enough to know that even though we can make this the number 1 headline about Kansas, Remy Martin's coming alive, he is one of their go-to players right now, coaches are slow to adjust. Right. And you've got a whole season full of data that suggests KU wants to play through their wings, namely Ochai Agbaji, your National Player of the Year candidate, and they want to play through the post in David McCormick. But now you've got this guy at the 11th hour entering the fold. Do you expect Providence, and then if KU's able to win, Miami or Iowa State to start to account for Remy Martin? Or do you kind of have to just ignore that and sort of go with the mountain of evidence that suggests they like to play a different way?
I don't think you can game plan for him, because I think if you do that and you take the attention off of any of those other guys, it sets them up to kill you. And those are the guys, right? Those are the horses. I mean, whether he's been their best player or not, Remy Martin's a role player and he's playing a really important role and he's playing it really well, but he's still a guy that comes in midway through the first half off the bench and brings energy.
Do you still think Bill Self sees him as a role player? Sorry to cut you off, but I'm not trying to.
No, it's good.
I don't want to get into semantics about what it means to be a role player, right? But when you talk about designing an offensive game plan around a certain style of play, like Remy has to have been bumped up the priority list a little bit, right? Or is he just sort of kind of getting in where he fits in?
Self said last week, right, that they've got 6, maybe 7 starters, and he loves doing that. He loves doing that because you have 5. That's what you have. But I get it. And
he loves telling us how little starting means.
Yeah. Everybody understands what he means when he says that. And it's not untrue. He could start Remy. He could start Mitch. We've seen that. I do think the value is there. I don't know that he would say he's a role player, but I do think that the idea for this team to go from where they are to that next level that he always talks about that they can get to is as much about how those other 4 guys are playing around Remy. And that tells you his importance. That tells you what Self thinks of his value. And it also tells you how long of a road this has been, because if this is a group of 4 guys who are mostly starters, if not all starters, that are now still in the process, deep into March, of finding out how they fit around this guy, that shows you how challenging this thing was for not only Remy, but for this whole team. I think this team, maybe better than any Kansas team in a long time, has shown that it's all guys that know how to play their role. In a sense, they're all role players, right? I mean, I know that's a cheap way to get out of this.
That is a cheap way. You can't. I'm not going to let you get away with that.
Well, let me explain though. Ochai's role: be the leading scorer and the guy that takes all the attention from the other team. Christian Brown's role: be the guy that other teams hate. Be fiery, attack. Jalen Wilson's role: drive the ball downhill, get on the glass and go. I mean, DeJuan Harris's role, very clearly defined. Mitch Lightfoot's role, very clearly defined. I know you don't want to call them all role players, but I think they are all playing roles to perfection.
All right, I still think that was a cheap way out of that question.
It was. I admitted it.
I'm going to give you a pass because
I admitted it.
I think there's some truth to having roles defined. Not all.
You could admit that you gave up on Remy. You could admit that.
I'm not gonna.
Okay, it's fine.
I know you're gonna try and back me into that one.
No,
I'm remaining steadfast on that. You know what's funny is you go back about 3 weeks. KU was coming off back-to-back losses to Baylor and TCU. They struggled again in the second matchup against TCU and then went to overtime against Texas on senior night. And at that point, it did not feel like there were high expectations for Kansas to go on any sort of deep March run. Then the Big 12 tournament happened. You get a 1 seed. And even at that point, you say it's a 1 seed, but yet it doesn't have Final Four vibes. Well, now not only have you played 2 good games against Texas Southern and Creighton, you've got Remy Martin coming alive at the right time, and the bracket, Matt, has busted wide open for Kansas. You've got maybe the most overrated 4 seed by virtually any metric in Providence for your first matchup. And then if you win that, you're facing the winner of either Miami or Iowa State, the 10 and 11 seeds respectively. So in a span of 3 weeks, you went to having no pressure to all of a sudden, you better go to the damn Final Four. Otherwise, this is going to be another one of those VCU type seasons.
All the pressure, for real. These guys have shown, this group this year has shown that they can handle that. I haven't seen them wilt very often in the face of that, and they could have a lot of times. If you get by Providence and you're playing Charlie Moore to go to the Final Four, or Iowa State, who you beat on their floor without Ochai and without Remy, if those are the teams you're playing to go to the Final Four, I mean, Bill Self will suit up in a Kansas uniform himself and go guard Charlie Moore before he loses to Charlie Moore in the Elite Eight.
The only argument I would have against that is I go back to that TCU loss, and this is coming a couple of weeks after you had lost to Texas down the stretch in a game you should have won. The next game out at home against Oklahoma, it was closer than it should have been when you had a chance to put them away. And after that TCU game, more concerning than the outcome of simply losing to TCU was the lack of poise that you showed down the stretch. And that to me is concerning when you're trying to think of what could end up costing you in March. I look at now these 3 teams remaining. KU is objectively better than all 3 of them. I think they would probably be 7-8 point favorites in any of these games, maybe more. You got Providence who's starting 5 seniors, or their main rotation of 5 seniors. Iowa State with 4 seniors. Miami with 3 seniors and a junior. Is there any concern that poise that we did see creep up at times could pop up?
I remember that TCU game. They were down 4 and they were acting like they were down 40. I mean, it was a weird game. And you chalk that up to being the grind of the 18-game Big 12 schedule, and it's just one of those nights. I don't know. I mean, we don't need to solve that right now, but I do remember that vibe, and you're right. I mean, those are experienced teams out there. The difference to me is Kansas is experienced in its own right. More than any of it, Kansas has the most experienced coaching staff. This is going to be Bill Self's 14th game coaching in the Sweet 16, and not just on game night is that important. That's important from the minute you win the round 2 game through tip-off of your Sweet 16 game, because that is where it's won and lost, I think. That's where the preparation, the distractions, how do you handle it? When you've done that 13 times before and your record's 10-3 in those games, you clearly know how to handle this part of the ride. Ed Cooley's done it 1 time as an assistant. This will be his first Sweet 16 game as a head coach. Jim Larinaga's done it a bunch. He's a veteran coach too, but not anywhere near 14 times. And then you've got TJ at Iowa State, who, has a team full of guys who also have not done that. The game is what matters, and showing up and executing and who's playing better and all that. Some of that might have been decided in these few days leading up to it without people even really knowing it. It's just a matter of been there, done that. We know how to handle ourselves. We know how to prepare a team, and the others are, I'm not going to say they don't know how, but it's hard to know how if you haven't done it.
Before we go, just for good vibes, it's March. We're all happy that we're still doing this. So for good vibes, I will admit I was wrong about Remy Martin. You were right. I am stupid. You are smart. I am ugly. You are
there. It is.
Incredibly good looking.
There it is. I was going to wait for that one. I needed that one.